Today, we have a special lesson about grammar. We're going to focus on the conditionals because there are four different types, and it can be a little bit confusing when to use what grammar structure. And this is advanced because not only are the examples that I'm going to use going to be related to business in a way that will make it relevant to your speaking needs, but also as a leader, as a professional, there are moments where you do want to elevate your English grammar. A lot of times I focus on letting you know that making mistakes is not a bad thing, and it's not. But that doesn't mean you stop learning and you stop improving. So remember, your English is good enough to get to the position where you are. So what we're going to work on now is building the confidence in your English, elevating your structure so that you can do your job even better, so you can communicate extra clearly and advance in your career. If we haven't met yet, my name is Tanya Suarez. As a communication coach for non native speakers, I'm here to help professionals like you communicate clearly and effectively in English. And before we get started with the grammar lesson, I do want to let you know about my leadership summer program. So, doors are closing very soon. You have about a week left to enroll. It's a small group, very exclusive, a lot of one on one attention. And speaking of one on one, you will also have an executive upgrade. So if you want to combine this program with one on one coaching with me to really elevate your skills in a shorter period of time, there is that option for you. So this is a 12-week program. It's amazing for non native speakers who either are in a leadership position or hope to be, and you want to strengthen your skills and your confidence. Now, about the conditionals. I don't know why we start with zero. So there are four: zero, first, second, third. So for the zero conditional, this one's probably my favorite because I think it's the easiest to understand. Also, the grammar is pretty simple for it. So the zero conditional is used to signify that when something happens, something else happens. So basically, you're going to use a zero conditional structure when it's a fact. So if plus the present simple, and then the present simple. And that structure will make sense in the example after this. Now, here's the thing. If you're like me, some of you might actually love grammar. For myself, I find that grammar labels, I don't know what it is about it. Just like even seeing the structure. Let me put this back up. Present simple. Something about grammar labels makes me feel so sleepy. And sometimes I had to work on my own preconceived notions when I started teaching grammar because I realized I had a block. I thought that was boring, and that made it really hard for me to remember what word or what verb tense goes with what label. But the good thing about this level of English is there is no test. You don't have to worry about present simple or which conditional was this. Don't worry about it. There's no test. All you have to do is connect this to the storytelling that you need. So I'm going to challenge you today to get out of student mode. And I want you to really embrace the lessons that we have today in a way that you connect it to not, okay, I need to remember that that is the first conditional, not the second conditional. That doesn't matter. I don't even care if you remember which conditional is which. What I actually want you to do is I want you to absorb it in a way that, okay, that sentence, that's something I would need to say in a meeting. Let me practice that. Let me make more examples that are similar using that same grammar structure. So I want you to connect it to your personal storytelling and personal English needs. Okay. So for the zero conditional, let's take a look at the example. If you press the button, the light turns on. So grammatically, this is the simplest one. If present and then the present tense. And again, this is just a fact. Every time you press the button, the light responds by turning on. Take a deep breath. If you're feeling tension, what that could mean is that you're connecting English with the stress of grammar. So right now, I want you to release the tension in your shoulders, breathe. At this level of English, it's really important. Anytime you study, anytime you practice, you want to activate calm confidence. Okay. So let's take a look at some more examples. Again, using the simple structure for the zero conditional, it's just used when it's a fact. So if employees follow safety protocols, accidents decrease in the workplace. Okay, yeah, like this is a fact. When they follow the protocols, accidents decrease. So now I want you to take a look at this and think, is this a sentence I would need to say? Or is there something similar that I would need to say at work or in a meeting and then modify this and practice the example that's relevant to you. When you connect your practice to personal needs and personal stories, it is so much more powerful because we're taking you out of student memorization and we're going into application. These are actionable tips. These are ways. I don't want your retention to be about the grammar structure. I want the retention to be about feeling confident when you need to use it. So we're changing the way we're learning. All right. And then for pronunciation, if employees follow safety protocols, take a little breath, a little tiny inhale through the mouth. So if employees follow safety protocols, accidents decrease in the workplace. So here, yeah, we have some connected speech opportunities, but the main thing for intonation, as a non-native speaker, you might be used to saying sentences all in one breath. To really be more fluid, which then helps you be more fluent, how you breathe is actually really important. So when I say a tiny breath, I mean a tiny inhale through your mouth. When you speak, that's the exhale. And that's going to give you, it has such a great impact on the rhythm and intonation. Okay, next one. If businesses adapt to market trends quickly, they stay ahead of the competition. So again, this is presented as a fact. You do this happens always. So if businesses adapt to market trends quickly, tiny breath, they stay ahead of the competition. Okay. And notice here, I didn't say if businesses adapt to, Americans use the reductions a lot. And so we reduce sounds for TO, not for TOO, not for TWO, just TO. We will reduce that to t. Now you can choose to continue to say to, that's fine if that makes you feel like you're speaking more clearly. But this is also good to know for your listening skills because when you're aware of the reductions that Americans use, your comprehension increases and that makes you feel more comfortable. If businesses adapt to market trends quickly, they stay ahead of the competition. Breathe. I'm telling you that tiny breath, it's not only going to benefit your intonation, the rhythm, which then impacts your delivery, it also helps you slow down your heart rate, less adrenaline, more calm. And that helps you speak more clearly and more confidently. It helps you if you struggle with sometimes freezing and you're like, oh, I know the words, but I can't find it in the moment when I need it. This kind of breath work allows you to have better recall. So do it. Okay. Now the next one is the first conditional. Now for the first conditional, now we're getting a little more complicated structure wise, but it's not bad. And remember, you're not memorizing, you're understanding the storytelling purpose of the structure. So when you use a first conditional, this you're going to use it when you want to signify that if something happens, something else will happen. Just want you to breathe, take that sentence in again. If something happens, something else will happen. And you're going to use if plus present simple and then will plus infinitive. If that feels overwhelming, don't worry about it. If you don't remember what an infinitive is, don't worry about it. Learn through the examples and then modify the examples to be more personal. And I'm telling you, it'll help you remember in a way that you've probably not experienced before. It's really cool. It's what fluency feels like. Okay, so the example here, if it rains, we will take the umbrellas. So if the event occurs, so if it in fact rains, we are ready with a response. We know we're going to take the umbrellas. And then one could say, like, if it doesn't rain, we won't take the umbrellas. So that can be another way that you think about it. So here, I think that this is a great example because it's simple to understand. If it rains, we will take the umbrellas. So I want you to then figure out the context. Okay, let's say you're about to go out, you're going to go for a long walk, and you and your friend notice that the sky is kind of cloudy. You're like, well, what if we go on a walk later? Like, what if it rains? Like, it's okay. If it rains, we'll take the umbrellas. So when you put it in a story, then you're like, oh, I understand now why I would use that structure. So it helps you with understanding it in a deeper way. And let's take a look at some business context. If our advertising campaign is successful, we will see an increase in sales next quarter. Okay, that makes sense, right? If this happens, then that will happen. So if our advertising campaign is successful, breathe, we will see an increase in sales next quarter. And you'll notice the pattern for the rhythm, the intonation. The pattern for this structure of sentence, it's pretty easy to see that it's usually going to be two chunks. Or if this is the first time that you're understanding this breath work, that'll give you a really clear way, a really clear position of when you are going to breathe. Relax your shoulders. Okay, now let's visualize. You are the director and you're giving your Monday update meeting. So, if our advertising campaign is successful, we will see an increase in sales next quarter. So notice with the visualization, once I'm in director mode and I'm giving a meeting and I'm giving them, like this is pretty positive, the tone was a little bit different. Kind of I projected my voice a little more because I imagined being at a table with my team. So visualization helps you really get out of that robotic English and it helps you find your voice so that you feel more natural speaking English. Okay, next example. If our team completes the proposal on time, we will pitch it to potential investors next week. Okay, notice tiny breath. So if our team completes the proposal on, so that we have some connected speech, proposal on, the consonant sound at the end of proposal, the L sound, and the vowel sound, of on, links, lawn. So this is linking, which is under the category of connected speech. The proposal on time. Again, if our team completes the proposal on time, we will pitch it to. Now, because of the linking with pitch it, I find that I don't reduce to as much in this particular example. I do say to instead of to. So we will pitch it to potential investors next week. Okay. And remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, pause it, repeat after me, find your intonation. Really, now that you're looking at the examples, you'll see like, oh, that's what connected speech is. Like, oh, that's how you apply it. Because I don't want you to memorize. Again, this is really important. I don't want you to memorize what connected speech is. I don't want you to be able to give me a definition. I don't want you to define linking. I want you to recognize it and do it. At this level of English, it's about doing, not about learning or memorizing. So we're getting out of student mode and into you're not an English student anymore. You're an English speaker. Okay, let's go back. Now for the second conditional, this one, again, we're getting a little more complicated on the grammar, but you got this. Remember, you're going to try to understand the purpose for the story. So with the second conditional, if something happened, but it didn't, something else would happen. Okay. So if I had $1 million, but in this case, you don't. So if you don't have $1 million, then you would say this: if I had $1 million, I would buy a yacht. But the implication, so this is where the grammar is really cool because what the conditional grammar does is it says a lot without having to say it. So I don't have to say, I don't have $1 million, but if I had $1 million, that there's more implied knowledge when you use the conditionals. So without having to over explain, it's another way of, I like to think of it as another tool for being concise. So if I had $1 million, I would buy a yacht. So in this case, as you see here, something that didn't happen, which you don't have $1 million in this example, and what would happen if it did. So if I did have it, what would you do? So now let's take a look at it in a more real life business context. If we lowered our prices, we would attract more customers to our online store. So think about the implication. If we lowered our prices, which means we haven't done it yet, we haven't decided to do it, but the result of that, we would attract more customers to our online store. So this is where the implication in the grammar does make a difference. And as a professional, when you're presenting these things at work, this is where grammar can help you be more clear. So if we lowered our prices, breathe, just inhale through your mouth, not your nose, and then don't exhale. The exhale happens when you speak. If we lowered our prices, we would attract more customers to our online store. Breathe. And this is going to help you if you have a tendency of being a fast speaker in your native language. Doing this kind of breath work is really effective in helping you have a more natural, slower rhythm in English, which allows people to hear you because they need time. Like your mouth needs different space for the English sound than it does in your native language. And so this is going to give you not only calm confidence, but it gives your mouth room to speak clearly and it gives your listeners the opportunity to really digest your message. So it helps you be a better communicator. Okay, another example here. If we upgraded our technology infrastructure, so this means we haven't yet, we don't have any upgrades, but if we upgraded our technology infrastructure, we would streamline our processes and improve efficiency. Okay, relax your shoulders. Again, if we upgraded and notice here we have connected speech, upgraded the D sound connects to the O. If we upgraded our technology infrastructure, breathe, we would streamline our processes and improve efficiency. Now notice here, even though processes ends in a consonant sound, the S sound, and begins with a vowel sound, because of the way I'm reading it, because of my intonation choice and emphasis choice, I don't really link it. And that's what I mean when I say that connected speech is not an exact science. There are so many variables. It depends on what you want to say, how you want to say it, and depending on where your emphasis is, it'll impact where there is connected speech. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just sometimes it's better for the message. So our processes and improve efficiency. So maybe I'm trying to sell this. So now let's get the context. I'm trying to really get the company to invest in the upgrade, and they're on the fence. They're like, I don't know. And you're like, well, here's some benefits. If we upgraded our technology infrastructure, we would streamline our processes and improve efficiency. So there I'm really exaggerating, emphasizing and when I do, that's when you hear the D, and, because a lot of times Americans reduce and we drop the D. But when you're emphasizing it for effect, we want to make sure we pronounce it. And the third conditional. Okay, the third conditional, I would say is the most complex grammar-wise, but again, once you realize the purpose of the story structure and the implications of the grammar, it becomes a lot easier to remember. And remember, you want to personalize your examples too. So make sure all the examples that I'm giving you, think about what's relevant for your work and your position. Make those changes so that when you're practicing, it's something that you can actually use in your next meeting. So with the third conditional, if something had happened differently, but it didn't, something else would have happened differently too. So it's kind of a mouthful. Let's look at it again. If something had happened differently, but it didn't, something else would have happened differently too. If that feels clear, great. Don't dwell on it. If it's confusing, don't dwell on it. We're just going to move on. And I find, at least for myself, and I don't know, you might be a different learner. For myself, I like to see the explanation and then see the example. And that's when my brain kind of clicks and understands the implication. So for the example, if we had caught the earlier flight, we would have arrived on time. So a situation that didn't occur, so you did not catch the flight, the potential consequence, if you had, would have been arriving on time. So we can explain it. So if we had caught the earlier flight, but we didn't, we would have arrived on time, but we didn't. So that's why the grammar matters. The implication of the story, the consequences, whether it's hypothetical, whether it's factual, that's what the grammar does. It clarifies all of that. Let's look at some business examples. If we had diversified our investment portfolio last year, breathe, we would have mitigated the losses during the economic downturn. Ain't that the truth? Okay, so for this one, if we had diversified our investment, so now when you think about the context, you're like, okay, I'm probably expressing regret, right? Like, oh, I wish I would have diversified my portfolio, but I didn't. So that's going to help you when you get the emotion and the backstory. Sometimes that helps with more effective delivery. If we had diversified our investment portfolio last year, we would have mitigated the losses during the economic downturn. So now for the context, maybe here you're thinking, okay, you work in finance, you're trying to convince your company to diversify the investment portfolio, or maybe a client. You're trying to convince the client, so we're going to have persuasion. You're trying to convince them to diversify this year. so that you avoid the mistakes of last time. So maybe you're talking about the client, there's some projections for some future economic turmoil, and you want to make sure that they're better prepared. So you can tell them, if we had diversified our investment portfolio last year, we would have mitigated the losses during the economic downturn. That's why this year we want to get ahead of it and we want to do this earlier so that we can avoid that happening again. So, do you see how when you do visualizations, when you really put it into context, it helps with a more natural flow? And you also have to kind of think of what you're saying before and after. So, it takes you out of student mode and puts you into real life English mode. And when you're a professional, when you're in leadership positions, this is key because the more you work on your intonation, not just your pronunciation, what that does is it helps people trust you more. And you have to have trust in business. You have to have those connections so that people respect you and take more importantly, respect is awesome, but respect with doing what you want them to do. Okay, let's take a look at another example. If we had implemented stricter cybersecurity measures, we would have prevented the data breach from occurring. Okay, so if we had implemented stricter cybersecurity measures, but we didn't, but if we had, we would have prevented the data breach from occurring. But we didn't, and now we're suffering millions of dollars in loss. Okay, so then here we can think of the similar visualization as last time. You're trying to get the company to invest in better cybersecurity, and you're trying to persuade them. They have sticker shock. They're looking at the amount. They're like, we can't spend millions of dollars on this. And you're like, we need to. Because if we had implemented stricter cybersecurity measures, we would have prevented the data breach from occurring, and that would have saved us millions in losses, not to mention the hit we took to our reputation. See how when you do the visualization, it forces you to come up with more context, and that's how you can push yourself to the next level. You can feel, do I feel comfortable? Can I talk more about this? If I'm trying to persuade them, like it makes you think outside of grammar. You're learning grammar. You're improving your grammar. You're using the grammar, but you're doing it in a way that benefits your message and your communication. So good. All right. Well, I hope that that helped you better understand the conditionals. I'll try to put together some notes for you with more examples. Remember to practice out loud because I don't want the English to stay in your brain. You have to feel the grammar and the pronunciation come out of your mouth. And if you enjoy this kind of connected speech and advanced pronunciation practice, download my free masterclass at tanyasuarez.com/masterclass. You'll learn some of the toughest sounds in American English, as well as really being introduced to the benefit of connected speech and how to implement it in your daily English practice.